Extension of Good Morning Uganda. I'm Robert Chirabo Nyonyintano. But just to remind you, we are always here from 6:30. And what we do is ensuring that we kickstart your day by informing you of what is happening globally and locally. Now, this morning, we want to look at the role of Uganda's social economic transformation and focus on the role of Uganda Development Corporation. Have you heard of Uganda Development Corporation? Well, in case you have not, today you will get to know about it and how is it important in the socio-economic transformation of our country. Join me welcome my guest this morning, who happens to be the head of public relations at Uganda Development Corporation, Dennis Dokoria. You're most welcome, Dennis.
Thank you very much. Good morning, viewers, and I'm happy to be here today.
Now, to begin with, when you talk about Uganda Development Corporation, is it an NGO? Is it a government body? Is it by an act of parliament? What is this and what's your mandate?
Okay, thank you very much, Robert. When you talk about Uganda Development Corporation, we're talking about the investment arm of government of Uganda. Just like UBC is the mouthpiece, the media arm of the government of Uganda, in the same light, Uganda Development Corporation is the investment arm of government. UDC, as we call it, has a huge and very long history. And in order to understand what UDC is, it's better that we get to understand where UDC started and how UDC came about. So we call UDC a new and old institution. An old institution in the sense that UDC was first formed in 1952. And the reason that UDC was formed was to...
1952?
Exactly, before the independence of Uganda.
Wow, that is amazing.
Yes.
Government was into investing?
Yeah, now that time, the Europeans who were here were now trying, because Africa was now calling in for independence at that time. And they were trying to say, how do we develop a critical mass of industry? So they formed UDC in order to attract industrial development within this country. And two institutions were formed that time. That was the Owen Falls Dam and the UDC. The Owen Falls Dam to generate electricity, UDC to develop industry, such that when that industry is developed, then it will stimulate economic growth in this country. And that's why when UDC was formed, it was formed to promote and facilitate industrial development in the country called Uganda. So it took off and it worked very, very well. By 1970s, UDC was one of the most important institutions. It was actually a key institution in this country. One, because it was the second largest employer to public service in Uganda. Two, it was contributing over 30% to the gross the GDP of this country. And it was actually managing about 38 subsidiary companies and 19 associate companies. Now, when we talk about subsidiary companies, we're actually talking about companies that are owned by government. The government owns over 50% shareholding in them. While the associate companies, government owns less than 50%. But the upheavals in the 70s and early 80s affected UDC. And it stopped to stimulate the economic growth that it was expected to do. So there was a bit of a limitation at that time, and therefore the institutions began to become a burden to government. So in the 80s and early 90s, the government took a different direction in form of liberalization and privatization. Now you remember that when we talk about UDC, many of these companies have an impact to most of us. Most of our parents worked in these companies. Now, there were different areas that UDC was in. For example, UDC was in the mining sector. If you hear about the Kilembe mines, HIMA, Uganda Cement Limited, all those were part of UDC. Now, how many people was it employing? Many of us who are now educated and standing here are children of UDC because our parents worked there. Talk about the hospitality industry. We used to hear about what they call the Uganda hotels.
Yes.
Yes. Now, all those hotels were UDC. Uganda Airlines, you know, was UDC. When you talk about the chemicals, we used to hear of TICAF, you know, fertilizer, Uganda Chemicals and Fertilizer is in Tororo. That was all UDC. When you talk about real estate, you go, Uganda Consolidated Properties Limited. Now, most of these buildings that you see in town, Embassy House, Amber House, Development House, many of those were owned by UDC. When you go to agriculture, you know, the Uganda grain millers, you would hear about the Uganda grain millers. You know, you'll hear about the Uganda Fish Marketing Corporation. Yeah? You'll talk about the livestock industries. All those were UDC. In the textile sector, Nyanza. When you hear about Nyanza, Nyanza Textile was part of...
That is by the 70s there.
Yes, all that time.
It was a powerful thing.
Up to towards the 80s, when privatization took place. All those were part of UDC. Look about the banking sector. Talk about DFCU. DFCU was UDC. It was called Ugadev Bank Limited, which was now changed to UDB.
Now,
We used to be UDC.
Dennis,
Yes.
the successes could be so many.
Yes.
Unfortunately, they seem to be of the past.
Exactly. I was just building a foundation to stay where we are going now.
Okay.
Yes. So, based on that success that we had then, government took a different position and privatized most of these institutions. So, by 1998, due to the privatization and liberalization policies, UDC wound up because it didn't have much to continue with. So when it wound up, definitely government took on privatization. Most of these facilities were privatized. But later on, the government realized that the private sector alone was not able to drive the industrial development, the socio-economic development in the country. Why? One, the private sector may not have the capital injection that government is able to put in for certain sectors. Two, they are profit motivated. And yet, because of profit motivation, they may not necessarily go into some areas. And many other issues. So government realized that I think it's important for us to come back and develop UDC again. And in doing that, by 2016, by an act of parliament, a new UDC was reborn, but with the same mandate that the old one had. So we have the same mandate of facilitating and promoting industrial and socio-economic transformation in this country. And that's the UDC we're
Now, how are you doing it? Because then you had assets, you're in business. Today, government, one thing I know, does not interest itself so much into business. Now, how is UDC functioning today and being relevant in socio-economic transformation?
That's a very good question. Now, when UDC was reformed or re-established with the same mandate, what did we do? Or what are we doing? Now, remember I told you earlier that government owned, UDC owned about 38 subsidiary companies and 19 associate companies. Now, we've changed the model. We are now more of stimulating the private sector growth, supporting the private sector to grow further. And that's why, as UDC, most of our investments are in associate companies than in subsidiary companies. Currently, in the last 5 years, would say, we have grown our investments from just one company, one operational company, that is the KISS, that is the Kalangala Infrastructure Services, to 18 companies. And in those 18 companies, we only have 2 subsidiary companies. The 2 subsidiary companies are Nile Hotel International Limited, which owns the assets that Serena occupies, Kampala Serena Hotel occupies, and the Soroti Fruit Factory. Those are the 2 subsidiary companies where we own more than 50% shareholding. But the rest of the companies are private owned, and we are working with them. So you asked, how are we stimulating industrial development now, or socio-economic development? How are you doing that? One, where these entities are set up, they stimulate economic growth and development in those areas. Now, how are they doing that? One, job creation. Right now, these entities are employing over 3,900 persons directly. So they've created direct employment. And beyond direct employment, we have what we call indirect employment, which goes to over 10,000. People are employed indirectly. And who are these employed? There are those working in the factories, and then there are all those who are working in the farms, providing the raw materials. There are those who are working forward, the ones who are able to do the marketing and distribution and all that. All those are jobs created.
Yes.
Yeah. 2, beyond just jobs, we talk about raw material offtake. A lot of raw materials are being taken off from the farmers. These farmers are taking off, are providing, are developing raw materials. We are encouraging people to go into the farms. We are into tea, for example, tea, the tea sector. We have invested in 40 companies. Actually, there are 40 companies. That is Mpanga in Kabarole, Mabale in Chenjojo. We have Kayonza, and we also have Kigezi Island tea. Now, if you look at, for example, the tea sector, some of these companies, we came to stimulate them to grow them. For example, Mabale and Mpanga were struggling. So we had an injection in them, and if those companies had probably closed, what would have happened to those people?
We would have lost an investor.
Exactly.
And
people would have lost jobs. And when one man loses a job, how many people are dependent on that one person?
In African setting, there are many.
Exactly.
You have a huge number of dependents.
Exactly. So now, if we are able to keep people's jobs in place, then we are sure that there is an economic transformation. Their livelihoods are better. They're able to take their children to school. They're able to do a lot. Health, and even their lives are much better. So that is just when we talk about job creation. Now, the second thing that we focus on is the issue of raw material offtake. Now, the farmers grow the raw materials. We are creating a ready market for these raw materials. If you grow maize, if you grow cassava, if you grow sorghum, in the northern belt, we have a factory that is producing ethanol, denatured ethanol as a green fuel for cooking. Now that factory offtakes the maize, offtakes the sorghum, offtakes the cassava for the production of that. Already, such a factory consumes huge amounts
Yes.
of these products. We have coffee in Budadiri. We are supporting a company which had stalled for some time. Now we have injected in it. It is back in life. Now that factory is now off-taking coffee within that community.
Yes.
Yeah, we have fruits in Soroti. We are off-taking fruits from the community in Soroti. We have in Mutuma in Luka doing cotton wool. We are off-taking cotton from the community. So, and I can go on and on and on with all these companies that we are supporting. So, job creation is key, off-take. And you know definitely, right now, annually, we off-take over 20 billion worth of raw materials from these farmers. Now, you can imagine how much money is going into the hands of these farmers and what life we are transforming within these communities. So that is basically. Then the third one that we think about, just beyond just jobs and raw materials, we also think in terms of our economy in Uganda. And
I'm so interested there.
Yes. Two things when we think about the economy. One, we think about the trade balance position in this country. Import substitution, export, promotion. So if we're thinking about the trade balance position, import substitution, we are investing in companies that are able to enhance
maybe Dennis, let me get this word. You've all through said investing.
Yes.
Are we investing on behalf of Ugandans as shareholders, or are we giving them shriving capital or something like that?
Okay, let's start with this. I told you earlier that UDC is the investment arm of government.
Yes.
And what is government? When we were in primary school, they were telling us government is the people, for the people, by the people, blah, blah, blah. Now, the money we invest is taxpayers' money. That's the money we are putting in these companies. And in exchange for our investment, taxpayers get a stake in those companies. So we are doing this on behalf of the Ugandans, because the government is the Ugandans. So we are doing this on behalf of the Ugandans. So we invest in an entity, and after investing in that entity, we get shares. We own shares on behalf of government.
Okay.
So in those companies, we have what we call UDC owning 30%, 40%, shares, 50%, whatever shareholding. We own the shares in those companies.
Now we are in business.
Yes. So, but as I told you earlier, we are trying to avoid being, not necessarily avoid, but being a majority shareholder, but more of a stimulant. And over time, once the investment principles have been acquired or realized as an entity or an institution, then we can float those shares to be bought off, either by the company that is there or at the market rate, and then government withdraws and uses that money to invest in another venture. So that is the model we are using currently.
Well, we are still looking at Uganda Development Corporation. What does it do? One would say the business arm of government. Am I right?
Yes.
Yes, the business arm of government that goes into investment. Some successes, like he has told us, what they have so far been able to achieve, but also the fact is the journey is still so long as far as getting to the former glory is concerned. Now, I'm also eager to understand, yes, you invest monies on behalf of Ugandans for the government, but how do you avoid the issue of, would I say, clashing with the private sector? Because that is something that is very common, and Ugandans have a thinking, a number of them, that government totally doesn't do business.
Okay, thank you. We don't clash with the private sector. We're actually stimulating. We're actually supporting the private sector. You know, the private sector go into business, but sometimes they are challenged. One with patient capital, for example. If you look at our interest rates, you know, commercial rates, sometimes they are really, really high. And the payback period is very short in many instances. Now, you find that probably a company has a lot of needs a capital boost, or a company has spent most of its money in the capital, you know, in developing the capital, the structures, the investment, and now is struggling with working capital, you know. Or probably a company needs certain equipment to boost its production and all that.
Yes.
So that's where we come in as an institution. Why? Because there are areas, for us as an institution, we invest in what we call strategic areas, strategic for socioeconomic transformation in this country.
Now, when you say strategic, you invest in strategic. I need more clearance, because I think it's not, I won't mention that company, but I think it deals in roofing materials and all that along Entebbe Road there. That was investing into there. So what strategic areas, what are your priorities of investment?
The priorities of investment, a few of the principles like I told you earlier on. What is our priority? Currently, UDC is prioritizing investment in agro-manufacturing.
Okay, now I have you right.
Agro-processing. Reason is, Uganda is an agro-rian company, organization rather, country. An agro country, an agriculture country, and we have a lot of raw materials in the country. Now, in order for you to impact that man in the community, that last mile person, agriculture is an area to impact. If I developed an industry, for example, in Bukona, in Nuoya, okay, and I put up an enterprise there, that industry is going to transform that community. Why? Because the people there now have a ready market for their products. If I boost an industry called Mutuma in Luka, which is struggling, and I boost it in order for it to off-take cotton from the farmers, then there is a transformation that is going to happen there. Because when it is locked up, when it's not operating, then the farmer does not benefit. The last man does not benefit. But when we are boosting and we put in money into it, it's able to off-take the raw materials, then the farmer will benefit. So that's very key to us in the agriculture sector. And agriculture sector actually consumes over 60% of our investment currently. We're investing over 60% in the agriculture sector, whether it is in sugar, whether it is in tea, whether it is in coffee, whether it is in cotton, whether it's in maize, cassava. We're actually in fruits. We have, currently we have 2 fruit companies. We have that one in Soroti and another one in Yumbe. Yeah, that we should be launching very soon. So all these companies are there to off-take. Then the second sector that we are invested in is infrastructure. So when we talk about infrastructure, we're talking about KIS, that is Kalangala Infrastructure Services, where we put in, we invested. And the reason we invested in KIS is to see how do we link the island to the mainland. The
waters to the land.
Exactly. So what did we do? We put road ferry.
Yes.
Ferry there. So when you go to Bukakata, you're able to connect from Bukakata to the island using those ferries. And what has that ferry done? Children are now able to come and study on the mainland. And in the evening, they go back to the island. Actually, we had an interview with those people recently, and they were telling us that sometimes they have to wait until the last child. If they leave any child, they will have to send another ferry back to pick that child. So you can imagine the impact of that. People are able to move materials, construction materials, across from this side to that side. And also the products produced on the other side, you know, the palm oil and all that, is able now to be transported this side. Why? Because we created that. We did not stop at only transport. We went in and also generated electricity on the island. So when you go to the beaches, you know, you go and enjoy your holidays in some of those beach hotels and recreation and leisure centers, that power you switch on, UDC. UDC put that power there, you know, together with the KIS. Water. We also piped water onto the island. We connected piped water into the island. Wow. So when you're talking in terms of water, drink the water, clean water, UDC did that. So sometimes we call ourselves the umeme of the island and the national water. So those facilities were set. We even put a tarmac. We even put a tarmac road, 66 kilometers of tarmac. When you go there, you will drive on that tarmac. That is UDC. Now, why did we do that? You notice that the development on that island has come about because you have put infrastructure.
Yes.
When there's no infrastructure, then development is slower. But once there's infrastructure, development grows. People are able to start small cottage industries. People are able to start hotels, restaurants, and all this kind of thing. So it develops that. So then we also went into road construction. We invested in a company called Abubakar Technical Services. Now it's doing many roads. If you go to the Kapeka Road, they're the ones who are doing that road. And they're doing quite a number of roads. Why did we go there? We want to develop local content. How can we develop our own local enterprises to also compete for big jobs with government so that they're able to do roads, so that money is able to stay within our country. So we invested in all that. And beyond that, we also invest in what we call the hospitality sector.
Oh, that is hotels?
Yes, we're also invested in hotels.
Okay.
Our flagship definitely is the Nile Hotel.
Is that only in Jinja?
No, Nile Hotel, Nile Hotel International Limited is just back here, where Serena
sits. That is Serena.
Now, yes, but that infrastructure,
yes,
those buildings, conference center, the hotel where it is, all that infrastructure, that land, and all the estate infrastructure is owned by UDC. Yeah. So Serena has what we call a concession. You know, has a concession too for so many years to run the hotel there. But the infrastructure belongs to Nile Hotel, which is 100% owned by UDC. So that hotel is there. So we have Nile Hotel, and through Nile Hotel also we have invested now in Igongo, in Mbarara. So we also now have a stake in Igongo. Then we go down to Commonwealth Resort in Munyonyo. Remember that in 2007, when we were hosting the Chogam.
Yes.
Yes, the government strategically invested in that hotel, and the reason was to host, to be able to have a hotel with so many presidential suites that is able to host people, delegates. And it did its part, and it continues to run. So it continues to attract businesses, conferences in this place. And most recently, we put up what we call the Speak Resort Convention Center together with Mera Group.
Yes, I remember that during the non-aligned movement and the
Exactly.
G77 plus China.
Exactly. Now, we wanted to have a hotel that, I mean, a conference facility that is able to accommodate over 3,000 guests. You know, and indeed, government strategically invested there, and indeed were able to accommodate that. Now, look at that facility. When we hosted NAM, there was a lot of impact all over the country.
Yes.
You know, first of all, infrastructure was improved, and I think Ugandans enjoyed the fact that infrastructure was improved. And were able to do roads and all that. Then also, people benefited the hotel industry. People slept in their hotels. The tourism sector, people were able to go to visit, you know, the tourism. The transport sector also benefited. Now, the reason we have that facility, it was not only for NAM. It's now a facility, it's one of the best actually in the region, that is able to attract big conferences. And when it attracts big conferences, then those conferences, those people who come, the ladies who come, will definitely benefit the Ugandans. In terms of tourism, they will go and see our tourist sites, they will sleep in our hotels, because not all of them will sleep in Munyonyo.
Definitely not.
Many of them will go to these other hotels and all this. So at the end of the day, you will find that we have transformed a life. So every penny that goes into a Ugandan, because of our investment, transforms their lives. Now, beyond that, we are also now looking at the minerals beneficiation sector. We are going into minerals. We are planning to do sheet glass in Masaka. We want to process mine.
That is not through a
glass.
partnership or still through a partnership?
No, definitely most of our investments,
yes,
we need to work with the private sector. Some of them we can generate, we can start, but beyond that, we now look for partners to work with. Because it's very difficult, I'll tell you, for us to fully say that we are running it ourselves. Why? We are government. Procurement processes, you know, all those things will come into play. And if an entity is run as a business, then, you know, if we're following our bureaucratic processes,
it will be different.
It will be difficult for the business to run. So most of the time, we may come up with an idea, a concept, but after we have brought it into play, we now look for partners to work with. And when we get the partners, we get into the business with them.
Well, I'm still with my guest this morning, Dennis, who happens to be the head of communication, Uganda Development Corporation, and we are looking at how this corporation has helped in the economic, social transformation of our country, the government arm that does the investment, that does the business side of it. Now, when you were beginning, you talked about the assets that were owned by then. Today, apart from social transformation through the various areas you've talked about, and I'm happy, yes, when we see private-public partnerships yielding success, it's very good. Now, what do we own? What are we proud of now that you, CD, can come out and say, maybe we are worth this, for this period we've made this, you know? That is what I'm interested in. Than just saying, okay, this is a company, it's now working, it's bringing money, the ferry, this, but the worth. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Maybe to start with, our investment is in equity. And that is in shares. So the worth of these companies, okay, worth of our shares is the worth that UDC has in these companies. So so far we have been able to invest worth 1.2 okay, trillion. Okay, right? So for so far, that is the investment we have been able to put in. So maybe we could say that is the worth, and we are still growing. But a lot of times, people focus so much on financial impact. which is okay. And definitely we're also interested in our businesses churning out profits, and we get dividends, and we move and move and move. That is very, very interesting for us. But when government invests beyond just financial. We look at economic impact. So beyond just the financial impact, we're also focusing on what we call economic impact. What is the impact on the community? What's the impact on the people? Because government is more interested in you as a person, you know? Is interested to see that, you look at all government programs. Let's look at the PDM right now. You know? Government is interested that that person on the ground, his livelihood is changed, you know? And that's why the government is now putting the money down to the people themselves, so that the production can happen. Now you imagine the production that is going to happen on the ground, you know? Now, that production will be massive. What does it require? It requires a market.
Yes.
Okay? Now that's where we come in. So if the production is massive on the ground, we need to also create a market to offtake what they have produced. So if they have been encouraged to produce products, let's say meat products, they have cows and meat products. Now we're thinking, if the production in meat is heavy, we need to invest in the meat sector so that we're able to offtake. If the production on the ground is in maybe cassava, agricultural products, cassava or maize or whatever, then we need to invest in enterprises that is able to offtake. That's why we are saying we are strategic. We look at things at a higher level, and we are saying, okay, what is happening on the ground? Where do we invest? You know, what is happening on the ground? Where do we invest? That's why before we invest, we actually do a lot of studies. You know, we do a feasibility study to understand. Beyond that, we do due diligence for the companies that come to us. We do what we call due diligence. We're able to understand them. We do diligence on different areas, whether it is their management, whether it is illegal, is it actually a legal being, is it status, you know? Financial due diligence, we're able to understand where they are, you know, financially. You may be there and you find somebody is in so many areas where they're affected. So we do due diligence, we do appraisals, we go through a whole process before we invest. So we don't just wake up, Robert
now
comes
with
and
that
say,
whole
Robert,
process you're talking about, haven't we had a bad deal? And what happens in case of such?
Well, the challenge we have right now is that many of us assume that industry is an event. Industrial development is a process. You know? It's a process. It's a step-by-step process. We had challenges, definitely, when COVID came in. We had challenges, and definitely people call it a bad deal. Because we had invested in some entities, COVID came in, 2 years dead, no market, no this. People say, it's a bad deal. But for us, we see the companies beginning to grow. We invested in the tea sector. You know what's happened in the tea sector recently? The prices plummeted. You know? We had no control over it.
Coffee is becoming a strong substitute there.
You get me?
Yes.
We had no control over it. But now we are saying, okay, we need to revive the tea sector. So what are we doing? We're now looking for other alternative markets. Where can we get other markets for tea? It was not, we had no control over it, but because we are so dependent on the Mombasa auction market, now when we have a problem, we are stuck. So the question is, it has opened up our eyes and say, can we look for other options? So yes, there are challenges we face, but we do not give up. We continue soldiering on. We know, because we have a vision, we know where we are going. That UDC of the 1970s, of the 50s or 60s, is the UDC we are looking at. We want to become that and even beyond that.
Make UDC great again.
Yes.
Well, time seems to be flying, and I must let you out of here. But before I do that, your parting shot to Ugandans, in case maybe someone is looking for investment, of partners to invest. Like you said, some of these struggling companies, yet they are among the priority areas that you focus on. How do they get to you, and also message to Ugandans? Some of them we've been discussing, and yes, there's now an investing arm, but maybe they want to know more about everything we've discussed.
Yes, UDC is here. UDC is yours. It's a government institution. It is here to serve the government of Uganda and serve the people of Uganda through investment. In case there is an entity that is interested, you send in your proposal to UDC, you write, requesting for the institution to invest. And then we start with what we call a preliminary review. There are certain parameters we shall be looking for in your company. Does it meet job creation? Those are our principles: job creation, offtake of raw materials. Does it impact the trade balance position of the country in terms of export promotion or import substitution? Does it cause local entrepreneurship? Does it develop local entrepreneurship? And finally, we focus on what we call regional balance.
Yes.
Because if you realize the private sector mostly focused a lot on the center, investing in the country, in Kampala. And yet, if we took industry to the people, then it will stimulate growth within the people. The raw materials are out there. Why should we have a factory here transporting raw materials here? Why don't we have the factory there so that we're able to transform people? So those are the 5 principles we focus on. And once your company or organization meets some of those principles, then we shall be able to have a conversation. If management and the team think this is a strategic area that the government should invest in, then the proposals will be sent to the board, and we shall do the due diligence and appraisal processes and all that, and eventually to the board. And if the board approves it, then definitely it goes to Ministry of Finance to now start sourcing for funding for that entity. So it's a process that we go through, and we are here to really transform this economy by supporting the private sector to stimulate growth in the country.
Well, thank you so much, Dennis from Uganda Development Corporation. He is the head of public relations there, and we've been looking at its role in promoting socio-economic transformation of this country. It is the business arm of government. It invests on behalf of you and the government of Uganda to ensure that, well, maybe those that would have fallen out even of business are there, and there's a trickle-down effect on that. Have a lovely day. See you tomorrow, God willing, for God and my country.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda Extra.